This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. The crisis at Scunthorpe Steelworks has forced the government into a drastic last-minute move to secure the plant's future. Today, after it became clear the plant's Chinese owners had no intention of saving it, the Prime Minister took the extraordinary step of recalling Parliament during recess. The last time that happened is when Kabul fell 4 years ago. Speaking this evening, Sir Keir Starmer says he views British Steel as a vital national security asset. He wants to take control of the plant, which is why he needs MPs in the Commons for a rare Saturday sitting. The news has been met with optimism in Scunthorpe tonight, where thousands of families rely on the steelworks, and with anger from the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, who said taxpayers could face a very high price.
Blast furnaces continue to burn in Scunthorpe this evening. Their future and that of this entire steelworks that bit more secure following an unprecedented intervention from the government.
The future of British Steel hangs in the balance. There is no time to waste. So we are recalling Parliament tomorrow for a Saturday sitting. We will pass emergency legislation in one day to give the Business Secretary the powers to do everything possible to stop the closure of these blast furnaces.
You heard the news?
I've seen the news, yeah.
Parliament's to be recalled tomorrow.
It triggered enormous relief among the workforce. Tony Gosling works on the key blast furnaces, following in the footsteps of his father, grandfather and great-grandfather. Recalling Parliament is a big deal. How's this gone down?
Well, I'm absolutely elated, and I know most of the workforce will be, because we've been waiting for this. I understand that the talks between the government and the company haven't been wholly successful. It looks like the government's prepared to step in, which is absolutely what the workforce want and absolutely what the town wants and the local community wants.
It has been a hugely anxious time for those working inside the Scunthorpe plant. Triggered at the end of March when Chinese owners Xingye began consulting on closure, claiming they were losing £700,000 a day. The same day they'd reportedly asked the government for £1 billion to keep it open. The government offered half. After that was rejected, talks followed with no definitive resolution. The immediate priority is to get the coke coal to its destination of Immingham Docks, currently sat anchored at sea and unpaid for. Without it, the furnaces can't run and high-grade pure steel can't be produced. And so taking control in the short term buys the government more time to explore saving the entire plant more permanently. And one way to do that is through nationalisation. Is this a step closer to government ownership?
We hope so. This morning we weren't sure that nationalisation would come. We were running out of time. If they needed to do it, they needed to do it now. Now I don't want to count my chickens, but yeah, we're hoping tomorrow that's what's going to happen. They're going to push the button on nationalisation.
Many had feared the worst. They feared steel production here could soon be a thing of the past. While nothing is guaranteed, at the very least they have a stay of execution. And Parliament tomorrow could deliver so much more. Rachel Townsend, News at 10, Scunthorpe.
Well, Harry joins us in the studio now to take a look at why the government has been so determined to keep the steelworks operating. Quite a move today, wasn't it, Harry?
Yeah, it was. And, Julie, this site is so important for the steel industry in the UK. For decades, Scunthorpe's steel plant has been at the heart of the North Lincolnshire town. And this weekend, the government will take extraordinary steps to try and keep it open. Back in 1970, we produced 28.3 million tonnes of steel. We were the sixth biggest producer in the world, but you can see how over the years that has declined to just 6 million tonnes a year today. Now, the world's largest steel producer by some margin is China, and we are way down here. Now, the government thinks manufacturing our own steel is vital because of its use in key infrastructure projects and for defence equipment, both areas the government plans to invest more money in. And Scunthorpe is the last primary steel plant in the UK.
It's our only ability to make steel domestically at this point. There's been conversations about converting to electric arc furnaces, but that obviously takes time to build. And the consultation that was announced by British Steel's owners was that it could shut in as little as 45 days. That timeline seems to be escalating, and so the government clearly has felt compelled they have to do something.
Now, that something is asking MPs and Lords to come back from their Easter break as Parliament is recalled for the first time since 2021 when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan. And it's the first recall for a Saturday sitting since 1982. Parliament will be asked to pass an emergency law to take control of British Steel so the government can buy and bring in raw materials and direct staff to keep the blast furnaces open. We don't know how much money the government has set aside for this, but British Steel's owners say the company loses £700,000 per day, which the taxpayer will now be covering. Now, this is not full nationalisation yet. The government will keep the plant operating and says all options are on the table, but with no prospective buyer lined up, public ownership remains the most likely outcome in the days and weeks ahead, Julie.
OK, Harry, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, let's return to Rachel, who is still in Scunthorpe for us tonight. Rachel, Harry was just saying there, clearly this will not likely to come cheap. Do the workers there really believe the plant may now have a long-term future?
Well, Julie, they're certainly hoping so. There is no doubt the mood here all day has been one of celebration. In the moments after that announcement by Sir Keir Starmer, people were beeping their car horns as they drove past the plant. You know, this is something that workers here have wanted for a long time. The plant has struggled as they have been passed between owners ever since the privatisation of the steel industry in the late 1980s. And as Harry said, you know, let's be clear, this is not nationalisation yet, but it certainly gives the government more power within the steel industry, and that has not been seen since Margaret Thatcher was in power.
OK, Rachel, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Vladimir Putin was served a double helping of White House diplomacy today as it appeared President Trump's patience is being tried over Ukraine. He posted on social media that Russia needed to get moving, and to reinforce the message, sent his envoy Steve Witkoff to see Putin face to face. There was less engagement from the White House, though, in a meeting of Ukraine's allies today. The UK and Germany have already replaced the US as leaders of the Ramstein Group coalition. Today, they try to counter apparently increasing American ambivalence with a massive new package of military aid.
Hand on heart, US envoy Steve Witkoff seemed eager to flatter his host at the start of his second meeting with President Putin since Donald Trump's ceasefire proposal. But 4 weeks on, Russia remains determined to dictate the direction of travel as the world waits for its answer. Vladimir Putin's focus perhaps clearer earlier as he met Navy commanders in St. Petersburg. One of our priorities is to strengthen the Russian Navy, he told them, strategic and nuclear forces. But President Trump's growing frustration at the Kremlin's slow response to his efforts to end the war in Ukraine is becoming clear. Russia has to get moving, he wrote in a post today. Too many people were dying, thousands a week, in a terrible and senseless war. In Brussels, the Ukraine Defence Contact Group met, co-chaired by Britain's Defence Secretary John Healey. They pledged more than £18 billion in military funding for Ukraine.
And so today at this Ukraine Contact Group, we step up our support for Ukraine in the fight. And our job as defence ministers is to get urgent military aid into the hands of Ukrainian war fighters.
But missing in action, in person at least for the family photo, was US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth. He spoke via video link, but at the last gathering he warned America's priorities lay elsewhere. In Ukraine, President Zelensky paid his respects at the site of a Russian strike on his hometown. 9 children in this playground were among 20 people killed here last week. The children were on swings and in a sandpit when the missile struck. After more than 3 years of suffering, can this new drive for peace succeed where others have failed? Neil Connery, News at 10.
Well, we'll stay with Ukraine and speak now to Dan, who's in Washington for us tonight, about a pretty eyebrow-raising suggestion from President Trump's Ukraine envoy about a potential future carve-up of the country in an interview that he's given. Just take us through what he's had to say, Dan.
Yeah, well, basically, we've got these sort of two competing visions for the future of Ukraine. You've got Steve Witkoff's idea, which is basically giving Vladimir Putin what he wants, which is the 4 oblasts, the 4 provinces that Russia partially has already, so it would give them more territory. Then you've got this other idea from Keith Kellogg, the Ukraine envoy, who's come up with a kind of idea of dividing Ukraine up, almost reminiscent of the way Germany was divided in after the Second World War. So his idea, you'd have this partition where you'd have a French and British zone of influence, if you like, in partnership with the Ukrainians in the west. You then have that yellow area wholly controlled by the Ukrainians, and then the Russian-controlled area in the red there, and there'd be a sort of demilitarised zone between the red and the yellow, which would have a kind of buffer zone of 18 miles or so. So it's a race really to set the narrative between these two competing ideas of what should happen to try and get the attention of Donald Trump. We spoke to a source a couple of months ago who's in the US, who's familiar with these ceasefire talks, who said that basically Trump is getting played by Russia and that Russia views Steve Witkoff as a dupe. But clearly the clock is ticking in all this, Julie. There's only 19 days left now until the deadline set by Donald Trump himself. This just gives you an idea of the tension within the Trump administration of how any ceasefire could be achieved.
OK, Dan, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, staying with the United States, and in the last hour, a judge has ruled that an activist at the centre of a controversial free speech row can be deported. Mahmoud Khalil was detained last month for his role organising pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. The White House claims that makes him a national security risk and eligible for deportation, despite having an American wife and residency status. The arrest last month sparked widespread demonstrations in support of Mr. Khalil. His lawyers say he now plans to appeal the decision. Now, with all the economic uncertainty caused by the tariffs, the Chancellor has had precious little to shout about recently, so today's GDP figures will have come as perhaps a welcome, if temporary, relief. Growth of 0.5% in February was well above what economists expected.
In a country that relies heavily on overseas exports, Britain's economic growth seen through February may be short-lived. This month, businesses have not only been hit by a wave of new tax rises, the new tariffs are already having a ripple effect across the UK too. This has been a working dairy farm for 5 centuries. Before the pandemic, they exported £500,000 worth of cheese to America. And although COVID affected business churn here, sales to the US had started to improve. Not anymore, though.
We really felt like we were at a turning point. We were working very closely with export partners, and it feels frustrating that perhaps that really amazing work that's been done might be undermined by things that are much bigger than us.
For this 15th generation farmer, she fears the latest growth in the economy doesn't reflect the sector now. At this holiday park, the recent hot weather has boosted business just in time for Easter. Bookings, though, are still low for the rest of the year.
I think it's very strange times at the moment. The national insurance didn't come until April, so I think we'll see some more changes again then. So I think it's very early to say how all this is affecting the businesses at the moment. People are being more cautious. They're not parting with their money quite the same way as they were before.
The latest figures suggest consumers are more confident to spend money, but experts warn this momentum is likely to change going into summer.
We've seen huge volatility both in policy and in stock markets. That's going to make companies unwilling to invest. It's probably going to result in increased prices.
The government says the growth figures are an encouraging sign, but for many, as the trade war spirals, there is little hope on the horizon. Sangeeta Lal, News at 10, Devon.
Since our investigation into the pregnancy drug DES aired last night, dozens more potential victims have contacted us today. Sarah revealed how women and then their children, grandchildren and even great-grandchildren were left with serious side effects after they were prescribed the medication. One woman who reached out today said she suffered from infertility after being exposed to DES in the womb. The Health Secretary has now ordered an urgent review to establish the extent of the scandal as the number of people waiting for answers continues to grow.
It was once hailed as a wonder drug given to pregnant women on the NHS. But DES was banned in the 1970s for causing irreversible damage to their unborn children.
Had a major effect on who I became.
Michelle's mother was given the drug to prevent miscarriage. She believes she was effectively poisoned in the womb.
It caused years of infertility, which was very upsetting after you get married, and it was very sad and you didn't quite know what to do and how to address it.
Michelle has been campaigning for justice for 30 years.
To an extent it's like thalidomide, but none of the consequences have been visible.
DES has been described as Britain's hidden scandal. An estimated 300,000 women were prescribed DES in the UK over 4 decades. It was used to treat pregnancy complications and to dry up breast milk. It was used from the 1930s for decades until researchers found a link to a rare vaginal cancer in the daughters of those who took it. Doctors were finally told to stop giving it to women in 1973. But some women have told us they were given DES as late as 1980. And after seeing our investigation, the chair of the Health Select Committee says the government must intervene.
As to whether we need further inquiries and compensation schemes, in the same way that we've seen calls for this for other scandals, whether it's the infected blood, thalidomide, whatever it is, it would strike me that this would fit those criteria, and the government should be looking at how they can start that process.
Many of the medical records from the time have been destroyed, but those who believe they've been exposed now want proper testing to catch cancer early.
These risks have been known about for decades. Why has the government not done anything to protect these people?
Officials within the Department for Health and Social Care and NHS England have been asked by the Secretary of State to look into this and to find out what's going on, who knew what when, and we will certainly be doing that.
What's the timeline for that?
I think we'll need to work on it rapidly, because obviously this is something that's been an issue for a very long time.
There were safety warnings about DES as early as the 1950s, and Michelle believes they weren't acted upon.
Pure negligence and pure lack of regulation.
From government on this?
Absolutely.
DES has dominated her life, and she's still searching for answers. Sarah Corker, News at 10.
The use of drones has been a key development in modern warfare, with unmanned aircraft used to devastating effect in combat zones around the world. Their size and manoeuvrability makes them incredibly difficult to defend against. That's why there's been so much attention on the groundbreaking work being carried out with quantum technology. Scientists say it could make drone detection far more precise. The research is taking place at the University of Birmingham, which has a proud history in the field.
Radar, once a top secret, is still a mystery to most people.
The refinement of radar helped turn the tide of the Second World War.
The magic eye misses nothing, showing how the approach of the Luftwaffe was picked up in good time in raid after raid.
So desperate were the Allies to keep it a secret from the Germans, they spread the myth that RAF pilots were able to see in the dark thanks to eating lots of carrots, which, by the way, isn't true. Fast forward 80 years, radar is on the cusp of another revolution.
Here we have the heart of the sensor, that is its timing devices.
At the University of Birmingham, where the kit was honed in the 40s, they've been trying to use quantum. This is why. Drones. Traditional radar struggles with anything small, slow or low.
So what allows us to do is to pick out small objects flying at a distance like this drone that you can see on screen right here.
And what are those other lines?
Those other lines are other objects which are occupying the sky at the moment, and in their majority they are birds or flocks of birds which are flying around.
So the dream is to be able to filter between a drone and pigeons?
That's correct.
The potential for the battlefield is huge. Drones have been so important in the Ukraine war, the UK government has just contributed another £450 million. Even domestically, with blood now being delivered in the sky, knowing what is where is vital.
If you imagine how your eye operates, your central vision is really good at giving you a sharp image of what you're looking at. Your peripheral vision is terrible at doing that, but your peripheral vision is optimized to detect movement. And what we're trying to do is to supercharge the peripheral vision of radar.
The science behind the kit is all about timing.
This is an example of something called a quantum clock, and it's a bit like an ultra-precise wristwatch. But now, if we started it ticking at the beginning of the universe, it wouldn't have lost a second by now.
It's that precision which enables scientists and engineers to detect smaller, slower objects, meaning soon drones like these will no longer be able to stay below the radar. Martin Stew, News at 10, Birmingham.
The tragedy of yesterday's helicopter crash in New York grew with every new detail that emerged today, not least these photos showing a family of 5 moments before the disaster. They were Spanish tourists. The helicopter flight meant to be a highlight of their trip to the States, and one of the girls should have been celebrating her 9th birthday today. None survived the disaster, which also claimed the life of the pilot. Now, what our government wouldn't give for an annual growth rate of 7%, well, that's what the booming economy of Ivory Coast in West Africa has achieved, on average, every year for the past decade. It's rich in coffee, cocoa and valuable minerals. But elections are looming and tensions are rising. That's because the current president, Alassane Ouattara, a former banker, is planning to run for a 4th term, even though the limit is supposed to be 2. Standing in his way, the main opposition leader, Tidjane Thiam, himself a banker who knows President Trump and what to expect from him. But he's embroiled in a legal battle over his citizenship, no less. He's currently living in Paris, where he told Raggy he expects to be stopped from standing for election.
He has led some of the biggest Western financial institutions, Credit Suisse Bank and the UK pensions giant Prudential. But now, Tidjane Thiam wants to take the helm of a vital, resource-rich West African country, the Ivory Coast.
Last week, his coalition of political parties tried to make their way into a court case that threatens to revoke his Ivorian citizenship.
Would you be surprised if you were stopped in your tracks and your candidacy would be thrown out?
No, that's the general expectation, that my candidacy will be thrown out. It's the appearance of legality, but it has no grounds where we know the outcome. It's already predetermined, but it's all going to look like a due process.
Currently in Paris, he says he and his supporters have faced intimidation back home, with security forces surrounding his house. He described to me how a recent party rally was harassed.
They went and they occupied the party headquarters. I went there personally. I stood between the police forces and our militants, and I told them, look, in life, you can't control events, but you can always control how you react to them.
He says he will do everything to avoid going back to the all-too-familiar mistakes that led to the civil war in 2011.
There is no history of good elections in Côte d'Ivoire, none whatsoever. The last election without violence was in 1990. We need to, I say, give up the Kalashnikov and the machete and the wooden stick and talk to each other.
We asked the Ivory Coast Embassy in London to respond to Mr. Thiam's allegations, but without a response. However, a regional election monitoring group's Ivory Coast representative had this to say.
With tension rising crescendo, without a real political will to face the situation, with the necessary lucidity, clashes could arise. We have seen what happened in 2010. What is needed now is concrete action. from both sides, the opposition and the ruling party.
But even if he was to become president of the Ivory Coast, how would he deal with the Trump administration, which has all but cut aid off completely to the African continent?
I've actually had the honor of having dinner with Mr. Trump in Davos, and I know people around him. It's a very tough world. You cannot rely on other people's and other taxpayers' generosity to develop a country and a stable and prosperous society.
The question now is, will he ever get to put his vision into practice? Raguioma, News at 10.
Now, could it be 17th time lucky for Rory McIlroy at the Masters, the tournament that's evaded him for so long? Well, based on today's form, he has some reason for hope. He was in brilliant form at Augusta, scoring 6 under par. Very nice, although there's still the weekend's play to come, of course. England's Justin Rose remains at the top of the leaderboard on 8 under par. If he can stay there until Sunday, the 44-year-old will be one of the oldest Masters winners ever. Finally, tonight, take a look at this. There are few sights in the natural world as awe-inspiring as a starling murmuration. Thousands of birds moving in perfect harmony, each a tiny brushstroke in a work of art. It is a spectacle enjoyed across the UK, but one we're being warned not to take for granted, because fewer starlings than ever were spotted in British gardens this winter.
It's hard to believe that birds of a feather who flock together like this could be getting harder to find. Murmurations of starlings show them in all their airborne glory, often birds who've migrated from northern Europe. But they're becoming a rarer sight in UK gardens and even in wetland centres like this.
In the past 15 years we had around 12 nesting pairs or so, and that's dropped all the way down to 2. So in the spring and summer they're actually quite a difficult bird to find now. They like to build their nest in the fringes of urban areas. So, for example, houses, buildings, they like to get in the little holes to build their nests. And nowadays, a lot of people are filling up those cracks, those holes, and there's nowhere for them to get in, so they're losing their nesting spaces.
600,000 people took part in the annual survey in which the public are asked to monitor activity at the end of January. The Big Garden Birdwatch found fewer than 785,000 starlings. That's a decrease of 11% since last year, and down by nearly a third from 2022. It means that the starling is no longer the third most common bird in UK gardens. Number 1 was the house sparrow, followed by the blue tit. Now there are more wood pigeons than starlings. Birdwatcher Cliff Watson says starlings have a particular appeal.
When you look at a starling in the sunlight, beautiful purples and reds, and the colours in the starling are absolutely staggering. And they're sort of birds you associate with the gardens. Probably a complex issue, but I mean, maybe pesticides, it may be people paving over their front gardens, I don't know. But certainly I've noticed a big difference.
Keeping a natural lawn with the grass not too long can help attract the birds, allowing them to forage for insects while looking out for predators. Otherwise, expect to see starlings continue their decline. Ian Woods, News at 10.
And that is it for tonight. From all the team here, good night. Have a lovely weekend.